back to Honey Knock. I'm Sophie, and this is Caroline.
Yay!
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Where did we meet? Well, obviously at school. I think I saw you.
Well, I had been hearing things about you.
Wow.
Not
I'm honored.
obviously all good things.
I think I saw you the first time at the worship night.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was like, oh, that girl, like, I need to, like, talk to her. It's like, she seems really cool. But I don't remember, like, actually the first time.
I don't remember actually the first time either. Maybe in the dining hall or something.
Probably. Somebody probably introduced us.
Yeah.
But, where are you from?
I'm from Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Okay.
Lived there my whole life, in the same house my whole life.
That's so cool.
Yeah. I have 2 younger brothers.
So you're the oldest?
Yeah, lots of chaos always, but
Yes.
we love it that way. And I'm a senior, and I'm a health science major, and I just applied to grad school to go to occupational therapy school.
I was gonna ask you.
And I'm pumped. Yeah.
How is that, like, turning it in? Because, like, some of my friends are, like, applying for nursing school right now, and they're, like, so stressed, but then it's done. Like, they've already turned it in, but you're still, like,
just, like,
stressed.
waiting. Yeah. I didn't know that's what I wanted to do until this summer. And so when I went home between my internship and coming back for classes, I was like, I'm doing all my applications right now.
Yeah.
And so I just, like, wrote crazy for, like, 2 weeks and turned them in. And then it's just a waiting game until, like, December, January. Yeah. So it feels, like, stressful. Like, you don't know where you're going to be, but also it's like, there's nothing I can do about it.
It's out of your hands now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of freeing.
Yeah.
Just to be done.
Yeah. It's been nice. And I can't even imagine, like, going to school and also applying places and, like, writing and yeah.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited.
What does an occupational therapist do?
That's probably similar to physical therapy, but a little bit more fine motor focus. So like hand skills.
Right.
A lot. I want to work with peds, so
that's
a lot more like you're learning how to use a spoon for the first time, or like you're learning how to write your name, or and I feel like my internship this summer, you just see so much progress in an hour with a kid because they're just changing and growing so much that it felt very rewarding.
That's
so I'm excited.
I was gonna say you should go with kids.
Yes,
I can see that. Okay,
I would have to. Yeah.
But she's a senior at Furman. Obviously, that's why we're in my dorm. So cute, so cozy. Okay, tell us about your testimony.
Okay, so I grew up in the church. For as long as I can remember. My parents were both following the Lord, and it was very much a part of a lot of the things that we did. I feel like the first time that I really remember like having a desire to follow the Lord outside of just like going to church in Sunday school was at the end of middle school maybe. And I was at a private Christian school, and so it felt honestly a little bit forced because it was like, this is all that anyone is ever talking about. I heard it at school, and then I would go home and hear it at home, and I was like, oh my gosh. But I had a lot of questions, and I feel like I was growing a lot. And then I went to public high school my freshman year of high school, and I did not like it at all, and that was hard. And my relationship with the Lord definitely grew, but not much that I can like remember now. And so after 9th grade, I transferred back to the private school, which is where I wanted to be, and that was really good. I guess maybe by my junior year, both of my brothers were there too, and that was really fun. And I think it was hard being in an environment where everyone is supposed to be a believer, and maybe that's what they're claiming, but people were not living that necessarily. Not in a like, oh my gosh, you're going crazy, but just like your life doesn't look different necessarily. Yeah. And I'm not sure that mine did either necessarily. Like, it wasn't, I definitely felt like it was the right thing to do to have a quiet time, but not because I necessarily wanted to do it. Right. So, yeah. And then my senior spring, I still didn't know where I wanted to go to school. I was down between Furman and Baylor. And ultimately, the closeness and proximity to home of Furman kind of made my decision for me. And I came to Furman and had, honestly, a sweet group of friends pretty immediately who loved the Lord, which was such a gift. But I did not like it here. Like, nothing about it. I thought that it was way too small. I was like, oh my gosh, I made the wrong decision. Like, what am I doing here? I had a long distance boyfriend at the time. And I think I just was like, one foot in Furman, one foot wanted to be at home. My friends at big schools were loving it, or so that's how social media was portraying it. And so I was like just confused. And so I actually flew back out to Baylor in November of my freshman year, with plans to transfer. And I had really been praying that the Lord would like give me a peace being at Baylor, if that is where I was supposed to be, or like not. And then I was just gonna have to trust that I was supposed to be at Furman. And I like had a great weekend there, but did not feel the peace that like I knew I would have felt. And so I came back. I had like already filled out the transfer application, came back and did not submit that.
That's crazy.
And then we went on Christmas break, and I came back in January and rushed. And I also thought that that was going to just cure my Furman experience. And it did provide me with a lot of Christian community, but obviously it was not going to solve my, and so that was hard. I just broken up with my long distance boyfriend. So I came back to school and was just like, what's happening? Like, I guess I'm supposed to be here. I rushed and it's still not fulfilling. I haven't been at Furman and not had someone somewhere else to talk to all the time. And I was homesick. It was just a bunch of things. And for the first time in my life, I started like being really anxious. And first I didn't really know what was going on. And I would just like wake up and feel really sick to my stomach. But then kind of like thinking about it, talking to some other people, kind of realized that's what was going on. And it kind of didn't feel like it was getting any better. And felt kind of out of control. And I think I was like spiraling and trying to find something that I could control. And so I stopped eating. And yeah, like at first was not like telling people, but then it's like, okay, well, if your close friends are eating every meal with you, like people are going to notice those things. You can't just like hide. So I started seeing a counselor in Greenville, just kind of for my anxiety that had started to present itself. And then I told my parents that I wasn't really eating, or having a hard time doing that, and was just like, I don't know what to do. And so we worked to switch to a different therapist who focuses a little bit more on eating disorders.
Did you ask for that, or did somebody push you to that?
That's a good question. Probably both. My cousin, who is in my grade, also went through something similar the year before, and I had watched all of that go down. And so I think I kind of knew where things could head if they weren't like taken care of a little bit more quickly. And I also knew myself well enough to know that if I didn't get help, I was just going to keep doing it. Like I wasn't going to be able to solve it by myself. And there was definitely like hesitation in me talking about it, just because like, other than my cousin experiencing that, there was no, like, that had never been discussed in my house, never been dealt with. I honestly didn't really know anyone that was dealing with that. I feel like the beginning of college is hard because you're getting really close with girls, but then it's like, okay, well, like, how am I supposed to know if I can tell you these things? Like, I've known you for like 6 weeks or however long. And so I think that like, at least in my circle, we weren't talking about those things much. So I think it definitely took a while for it to come out. I would say like, I don't know, like maybe 6 weeks-ish, maybe less. I can't exactly remember, but it had been like, at that point, people were noticing and like saying things. So I felt like I needed to, and it's funny, like now being able to talk with people or just like reflect on my experience. And I knew totally that it was not rational. Like, I remember calling my mom and being like, I'm having a panic attack over like driving to the grocery store, but like, I know this isn't normal. But it was like, there's nothing I can do to not feel like this.
No, literally.
Yeah. So I think it was a weird thing of like being so self-aware that I was fully coherent of things happening, but also obviously I didn't have enough power to like stop whatever was happening. So then I went on spring break. And we went to Disney World for my birthday. My birthday's during spring break. So my parents flew us all down to Florida, and that was really fun and felt honestly kind of like an escape. I think it was like, I don't have to think about these things, and like, I still wasn't really eating, but it just felt different to like not be at school, I think.
When you're with your family.
Right. And I still hadn't gotten into this new therapist at this point. Like, I was gonna see her after spring break, but like I had to wait a little bit. And so I came back from spring break, and first of all, I was like, okay, I love it here. And like, nothing, people ask me now, and I feel like in talking to younger girls, it's like, okay, what clicked? Like, what about spring break just made you like it? But honestly, I think it was just the fact that I had to come to terms with like, this is where the Lord has me right now. And like, I've tried to change that and it didn't work out. And so like, I know retrospectively that I would look back and be like, oh my gosh, like, this is totally why you have me here. And I just had to trust in the moment that there was going to be that eventually. But I came back from spring break and started seeing a new therapist, and she's incredible. And aside from Jesus healing, she played or has played a really impactful role in that, and she loves the Lord. And yeah, it's funny because I think that people think, or I thought this at least, like, oh, an eating disorder, like, it's just like cured. Like, I think I thought of it like the flu or something, like you get it and like it's over. And obviously I wouldn't say it's something that I like struggle with on a daily basis anymore, but like, I often still have thoughts that I was having 3 years ago. And like, I think that it will be like that for maybe ever. I don't know, but I think that that is a way that the enemy knows he can have a foothold. And now it's like my choice to take those thoughts captive and remind myself like of who the Father says I am, and that I guess at the time, like, I just couldn't figure out whose voice was the right one to listen to. So I feel like that was pivotal in me following the Lord, because it felt really lonely. I was like, oh my gosh, no one else has ever dealt with this in their whole life, which is obviously not true, but like, it felt so isolating. And so I definitely was like really pursuing the Lord a lot, and trying to discern like, who do I tell? What am I going to tell them? Like, what, I can't even get through the next, I just like really had to break my day into like, okay, I need to get through the next 15 minutes. Like, how can I pray about, like, I need to get through the next 15 minutes, and then pray about the next 15 minutes and the next 15 minutes. So it felt very daily battle. And I think that was exhausting. Like, I just remember being really tired. And I went home for the summer, which a decision that I had made when I wasn't doing as well. And by the end of the semester, I was doing better. And summer at home was hard. And my parents know that, and I love them to death. And I would love spending time with them more than anything else. But I think going from complete independence to being back in the house was shocking for me. And so it was a long summer. But that made me really excited to go back to school in the fall.
That's cool.
So I was like, definitely, I love Furman. And my sophomore year was great. It was one of my favorite, it might be my favorite year at Furman. I think living in Lakeside and being around so many people, new people all the time, is like, you feel like you just have so many friends, and like, you're so known, and you're up too late and too loud and
Right.
whatever, and it's just fine.
Right.
So that was really fun, kind of uneventful, I guess. But I will say that my decision to go home after freshman year kind of gave me the desire to not be home after my sophomore year. And so I had no idea what that was going to look like and was kind of open to whatever the Lord kind of wanted to do. And I had a friend from Clemson call me in the fall and asked if I wanted to go out to JH Ranch in California. And I was like, yeah, I have no idea what that is, but like, I don't want to go home.
Right.
And so she sent me the application, and honestly, I applied very blindly.
Yeah.
I knew that it was a Christian camp type ranch thing, but I didn't really know what that entailed.
Right.
I had an interview and I got the job, and they actually don't tell you what your job is for the summer until you get out there.
That's kind of crazy.
Yes. And honestly, I look back now and I'm like, how did I even do that? I knew not a single person going out there. I had never been. I didn't know my job, and I was going to be out there for like, I think I was out there for like 15 weeks. Like literally mid-May to mid-August, the whole summer. So thank goodness for the courage that I had then, because I'm like, I don't know what I would do now, but it was life-changing. I think just the dependence that I had to have now on myself, because I literally didn't know anything. And just the ways that the Lord showed up. Like, we flew out there, and then you get on a bus, like a yellow school bus, and you ride like 7 hours to the ranch. And so fun, like not disorienting at all. This girl walks up to me and she was like, "Are you Caroline?" And I was like, "Yeah, like, am I supposed to know who you are?" And she was like, "Oh, I go to Clemson." And she was like best friends with the girl who had sent me the application. Wow. So it was just, and that felt like it was happening the whole summer. Yes. And so I felt like, okay, like this is exactly where I'm supposed to be. And we got there, and I lived in a house with 26 girls. Oh my word. And 8 girls lived in my room. Wow. So it was a humbling experience. And this sweet girl lived on the bunk next to me, and she is a grade younger than me and from Mississippi, or she lives in Mississippi now. And she had decided to come out 4 days prior to flying out. Oh, wow. I have no idea how she did that, but that being said, the first 2 weeks we were like, we have to find a way to get back to the airport. Like, we are not doing this. No. And we were both miserable, and like, I don't remember being like crying a lot about it. Like, my freshman year of college, I cried almost every day. But I definitely remember being like, this is not it. Like, I made the wrong decision. I need to come home. Like, I was not happy. And I think, honestly, the Lord was kind in giving me someone else who felt very similarly to be like, okay, well, you're not going to walk this alone. Like, you're here, you're kind of stuck here, and like, at least someone else feels the same way you do. And then I got placed. My job for the summer was to do childcare with the full-time ranch staff kids. Whoa. Which was such a gift, and I could have been placed in a multitude of things, and I'm sure I would have found the beauty in it, but that is like, I didn't even know that was an option, and it could not have been more what I wanted to do. So that was awesome, and there were 4 other girls with me, 1 girl in my grade who goes to Alabama, who's like my dearest friend now, and I remember sitting on the trampoline with her one morning, and she was just like kind of expressing the fact that she felt like she was having a hard time connecting with people, and she felt like no one really got it. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is how I feel. So kind of from then on, we had that moment of being like, oh, we're in really similar places. And she had been out to the ranch before, not to work, but as a camper. And so she knew a little bit more than I did, which was really reassuring of like, okay, I'm not doing this by myself. Like, someone else knows a little bit more, or like at least how to get around this place. Literally. So that was really sweet. And I definitely like came to love it. And I think we felt like we were parenting kids, because it was like, your parents are gone from like 9 to 4 or 9 to 5, and then like we get to take you down to worship at night and like
that's really sweet.
see like heaven through such a new lens. And it was awesome. And I was definitely ready to come home in the sense that like I'd just been gone for a really long time.
Right.
But it was like I look back so fondly on it, and like my prayer life was so changed just seeing like basically, so we didn't get paid for the summer, so it's all service work.
Right.
And on guests will come out for 6 days. Parent child is most of the summer. There's a few weeks of just high schoolers, but mostly is parent child. And on the last day that they're out there, we have banquet and what they call our payday, and it's where people from the week can give like a testimony of the week, and like we get to see what the Lord has done. And so that was amazing just to see the ways of like we would have to go to intercession twice a week, and we would be praying over people who were in a talk or in worship, and to get to hear stories of like girls or guys that were praying out loud in intercession, and then like 3 days later you hear that like I just remember this one specific story. This girl was praying, and she like had this vision that there was a dad who was in who was in worship, who felt like he had his heart just like locked in chains, and she was just praying that like throughout the week like his chains would be broken and like his heart would feel so much freedom. And I remember going to like the banquet, and maybe she had a conversation with him, or maybe he shared it. I can't exactly remember, but somehow I guess she shared it. Like, I've been praying this week for, like, I've just really felt in my heart that there's a dad in here who came in with chains and, like, feels so free now. And he stood up and was like, that's me.
I just got chills.
Yeah. And it's like, those things don't just happen. And I think that the power of prayer and, like, being so in tune with the Spirit was just, like, radically changed for me.
That's crazy.
And we got to see, like, physical healings and, so much goodness. So it was awesome.
So cool.
And then I came home for 8 days maybe, and I flew to Scotland for the semester.
Very fun.
Oh my gosh. Fun would not be the word I would use to describe it at the time.
Right.
I got to Scotland and I was definitely like, oh my gosh, I should have never done this. Right. Yeah. And I kind of felt like that for a lot of the semester, in all honesty. It was really hard. Scotland is incredible, but when the sun sets at 3 p.m. and it's 40 degrees and raining almost every day, it is like, okay, what is happening?
Yeah, that's tricky.
So there was a lot of good that came from that. I think the quick turnaround was really hard. Yeah. And by the time that I was in the middle of summer, I was not very excited about choosing to go abroad. Right. But through a series of circumstances that happened, I like had a really hard time getting my visa and a bunch of things. And I felt like the Lord was closing doors. I was like, oh, well, like, I guess I'm not supposed to go abroad. And I was like kind of getting excited about it. And then like the doors were like flying open, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going. So it did feel God ordained in the sense that like things had to happen in order for me to go, but it definitely wasn't exciting at the time.
Yeah, that's okay.
But I learned a lot. One, I spent a lot of time by myself. I read a lot of books. I read like almost 3/4 of my Bible while I was abroad. And I learned a lot about being alone with the Lord. I also learned how to Sabbath really well. Yeah. It's really cool. They kind of the Christian community in Scotland goes to church in the morning and at night. And so we just like did what everyone else was doing. And they practice basically like being Sabbathing in community. And so we would like go to church in the morning, go to like some family friend's house. And it was not like, okay, you eat and then you go home. It was like, you have lunch and then you have tea and then you have a little nap. But like you're staying with them all day long, and then you walk back to night church together. That's so cool. It was awesome for us just to see, like, obviously we didn't have the workload that we have at Furman, so it was a little bit more like practical for us to do that. But it was great for us to see the ways that like life is meant to be lived a little bit slower and like just the ways that we could cultivate relationships without being like, oh my gosh, I have a test tomorrow, like I can't talk to you right now.
Yeah.
And so that was really awesome. And then
That's
the
so
other
cool.
thing, we had internships,
Mhm.
and we had met with an internship like coordinator beforehand, but basically they just ask you like, what are you interested in, and then they choose your internship.
Okay.
So you can put in some preferences, but like
You
I
know
didn't
what
get
you're
to
saying.
say like
Right.
really where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do. And I got placed at this nonprofit called the Edinburgh City Mission,
Mhm.
which actually is a Christian nonprofit.
Whoa.
They didn't even know that I was a believer. Crazy.
It's like a God thing.
Yeah. And they account for like 50% of the city's food distribution to the homeless population. And so I worked with the homeless population for this semester, and in all honesty, I think I had a really different view of the homeless population than I do now, just of being like very much us and them.
Right.
Versus like us and us, and it just like
Right.
looks really different to me now. And it was neat. Like the city's big, but like the community is small is kind of what
really
they say.
cool.
And so I would get to see people that I would see in the food bank or at meals during the week, like in the park.
Right.
And it's funny because I think that once upon a time that would have like kind of freaked me out a little bit. But just like getting to hear their hearts and their stories, and like they're just as human as me and you, I was like thrilled to see them like
so
on the streets.
cool.
So it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I learned a ton, and they had never had an intern before, so I got to do a lot more than I thought I was going to get to do. And sit in on some meetings and just hear about how like the pandemic impacted like the finances of a nonprofit and kind of just like a bunch of different things. So that was really cool.
So cool.
Yeah. And the girl, this is crazy too. The girl that was my boss was maybe like 4 or 5 years older than me, and had worked in California for 9 months.
Whoa.
Yeah. And like I had just been in California, and so I was like talking about things, and I think it's funny because I miss Chick-fil-A desperately, and no one knew what it was. Like,
right.
But then this girl was like, "Wait, I've been to Chick-fil-A," and I was like,
just like the little
"Thank
things.
you,
Thank you. Like, I want them off of
yeah, exactly." And so it was neat. And I was the only one in my program who went to a different school than everyone else, because everyone was going to the business or comm campus, and I was going to the health science campus. And that was really hard at first, kind of just being alone. But it also gave me a heart for international students that we have in our classes, because I felt like my Scottish friends were so kind about being like, oh my gosh, like we want to be friends with the American. And like there were so many moments where it was like, wow, y'all already have your friends, and like you're just going to do the group project together, and then like I'm just going to get left here. And while like that ended up being okay in the end, I think it gave me this sense of like empathy and compassion of like the ways that we hear like I couldn't have told you who was international in my class because I didn't care. Like, or I just had no idea. I was so consumed of my bubble that I just was like blind to everything going on around me. And now I have such a bigger heart just for even like smiling or asking someone how their day is going. Like, we can't be best friends with everyone, but I think just like stopping and being like, is there anything like I can do for you or you need help with? And so I definitely felt isolated, but also like it was weird to be an outsider in a country that like still speaks your language. Like they were speaking English, but like I don't know.
Like that.
It was so odd.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And interesting and hard.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like a lot of parts of your story keep going back to like the dependence of like growing up and not really investing in it, which is very common. But then like coming here and having to trust, like the trust and dependence, like trusting that you're where you're supposed to be even though it doesn't feel right.
Right.
And then like at camp, trusting that you're supposed to be there even though it didn't like not felt right.
Yeah.
And then like going abroad, like trusting that you're supposed to be there even though it didn't feel right. But then at the end of all of those things, it's like deeper dependence on Jesus.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And I think that happens so often. And sometimes we have to have big things like that to do it. But then sometimes it's in small little things that, like, I need to trust that like Jesus is opening these doors.
Right.
And
for
our
a reason.
Don't change that.
Yeah.
And I think often like I'm trying to figure out what to do with my summer. And it's like I think I'm supposed to work at camp, but I'm terrified of that, and I don't really want to right now.
Right.
Because I'm like, I just want to be home, but then, like, I don't really want to be home.
Yeah.
But then it's 15 weeks, and it's like, I'm going to be exhausted. Like, am I going to be able to go from 7 a.m. to 12 p.m.? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, but then learning dependence on Jesus, and then even if I'm there, and the whole time it doesn't feel
that, like, you could
perfect,
look back years later
and
be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I think quickly we're formed by how our feelings are.
Yeah.
And like, we're given feelings on purpose, obviously, but sometimes they shouldn't be in control. And just like how you said, like, taking your thoughts captive of, like, freshman year, like, eating disorder, it's like, that makes so much sense. We're so out of control.
Yeah.
And especially in a new season of life, that we try to control what we think we can.
Right.
But then, like, at the end of the day, like, it leaves you more empty. And then you just realize, like,
and
you
more out
needed
of control.
Yes!
Yeah.
It's like, wait, I need to depend on Jesus in this. And so I think that's really sweet how, like, your story has that theme of, like, the Lord so graciously and sometimes so hard showing, like, that deep dependence on him, and then how you've responded in that of, like, that's what I've seen. Like, now that I didn't obviously know you before that, and that's what I would see. Like, when I saw you, I was like, oh, she loves the Lord. But then it's cool to know, like,
it wasn't
there's
always
behind.
like that. Yeah.
And, like, because then it's like, that's how it is. Like, I love the Lord, but then there's always these Satan's foot in the door.
Yeah.
And he really is sneaky. Like, he knows exactly where he needs to put his foot.
Yeah.
And then taking my thoughts captive. I've been praying, like, Lord, like, take my thoughts captive.
Yeah.
Because they go so crazy.
All over the place.
And then it's like, oh my gosh, like, I just let Satan walk all over me.
Yeah.
I'm like, sorry.
Yeah. Hello. I know I had a conversation with someone yesterday about, I think a lot of times for me, Satan, like, will tell me the half truth of, like, you're not good enough or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, at the end of the day, like, I'm actually never going to be good enough.
Right.
But, like, because of Jesus, like, I still get to be called worthy. And so sometimes I have to remember, like, it's not always a full lie. Yes, and I think we think, like, oh, you're telling like, you're not telling the truth ever. And it's like, well, he is not always telling the whole truth, but sometimes he's telling half of the truth of, like, you're not worthy. Yeah, like, I'm not worthy. But, like, because of Jesus, I get to be called worthy. Yes. And so sometimes I have to remind myself, like, part of this might be true, but, like, I need to figure out what's not true and flip it. And yeah, I think coming back from abroad, like, I just, like, kind of idolized Furman in the sense that, like, I thought it was going to cure all the problems that I'd had abroad. And I came back from abroad and it was, like, horrible. Like, I thought it was going to be how I left it when I finished sophomore year, and it wasn't. And, like, people move on and they change in a whole semester. And, like, I knew in my head that everything wasn't going to be the same, but I didn't really believe that, I guess. Yeah. And so when I came back, I had a really hard time assimilating, and, like, it was just, I think, genuinely the lack of vitamin D that I had experienced was like not good for me. And we had a family friend pass away in September while I was abroad. And then one of my best friends from home, her brother died in February, like 2 weeks after Bryce died. And so all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, I've never dealt with death in my life. And then, like, people are, like, literally dying left and right. Yeah. Like, and it wasn't just people that I didn't know. It was, like, my parents' friends and, like, my best friend's siblings who were, like, 24, like, dies randomly. And, like, it was just a lot. And so I think that I had kind of, to the whole point of dependence, is, like, I actually have no idea what the Lord's doing. And I remember, like, crying and being like, I don't get it. Like, this doesn't make me want to think that you're good. Right. It's not that I don't think that necessarily, but, like, the things that you're allowing to happen right now, to me, are not a display of your goodness. Right. And so, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, no, literally.
And I think that I was in this, like, somewhat state of frustration and, like, out of spite, like, I'm not going to spend time with the Lord because, like, he isn't being good to me.
Yeah, no, literally.
And after a few weeks of not spending time with the Lord, I was like, okay, so something is wrong.
This is not working.
This is not working out. And I think that he had to prune, like, my pride and my selfishness of, like, I want you to do what I want when I want it. Yeah. And I had to learn that, like, dependence looks like remembering his faithfulness even when it doesn't feel like he's being faithful.
Yeah.
And
that's really good.
Yeah. So like the semester ended better than it started. And also I got to live in Greenville this summer and do an internship randomly with an OT office. Sweet. Didn't even think I was ever going to do that with my life. Yeah. Did it. And then I was like, oh, I'm applying to grad school. So now it's cool to be on the other side of most of college and see the ways that the Lord has been faithful. But I have to remind myself all the time, like, and sometimes even physically writing it down, like, okay, Jesus was faithful today because, so then like 3 days later when I'm like, what is happening? I'm like, oh, wait, like he cares about the earring that got lost and you helped us find, or you whatever. So
that's really good.
I feel like I've learned a lot, but I'm in a perpetual state of learning.
That's
for
really
sure.
Sweet. And just to like wrap it up, I really do like that part of like depending on him and trusting him when it doesn't make sense. And I think as believers, it's easy to be like, I've been faithful. Like, Lord, like I've been faithful to you. Why don't I have X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
Like what? And he's like, actually, like he's protecting your heart in this, or he's going to reveal this to you. Mm-hmm. And when we can't see the whole picture, we try to control the whole picture. Yeah. And then that's not trusting. Right. And that's not depending on him. And so just the trust independence when it doesn't make sense. Yeah. And then eventually it will, and if it doesn't now, it'll make sense later. Yeah. And like I think that's just crazy, and I see that so often in my life, like trying to depend and then putting it back on me. Yeah. Being like, this is my pride here.
Oh yeah, it's a constant state of failing and confessing and trying like, again.
You're not faithful. Like, how have you been faithful to me? And I'm like, I don't even know. Yeah. And then I'm like, oh my word, like, I look down and start saying it, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Like, you have been faithful to me. But I think it's easy when we see so many things going wrong to forget that he's faithful. Totally. Yeah. Thanks for sharing your story.
Yeah, of course.
I think that's just like, it's really interesting. Like, you're walking out of the season I'm walking into. And so it's really interesting just to hear these things and just be like, sometimes it feels right and sometimes it doesn't feel right. And that's okay. Yeah. Like, he's clearly opening doors. And just to keep walking. In that, like, dependence. Yeah. So, that's so good. Yeah. Thanks. Yay. And thank you guys for listening. And I'll see you next week.